Eagles Entertainment.
The journey of the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm Fran Duffy, and we're just about a week away from the 2020 NFL Draft. It's going to be unlike any other NFL Draft that we have ever seen before, obviously due to the circumstances surrounding the country and surrounding the world right now. But look, it's going to be a really fun event to follow next week. I'm really excited about it. I don't know if you've seen the updated broadcast information, what it's going to look like. ESPN and NFL Network kind of joining forces here for this broadcast. It's going to be different. It's going to be unique. They're going to make it fun. It's going to be very, very fun to follow this along. But this week on the show, we're going to hit on some of the latest rumors, some of the notes, the news, the nuggets going around the NFL in regards to the NFL draft. So we'll dive into some articles from Peter King. We'll dive into some news from Mel Kiper, from Daniel Jeremiah. We're going to go kind of around the gamut here. Dane Brugler released a 7-round mock draft, so we'll break that down. A lot of things that we're going to hit on, and then we're going to wrap up our position superlatives, all that in Draft Buzz with Chris McPherson and Ben Fennell. After that, pick 6. We're going to talk about 6 rumors we're buying stock in right now around the NFL draft. And then we've got some questions from you guys at home in our draft mailbag. So all that being said, let's get into this now. It's time for Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, guys, as I welcome in Chris McPherson and Ben Fennell. Guys, I'll start it off as I have the last few weeks. How's everything in Casa de McPherson and Casa de Fennell?
You know, I really feel, not just for you, Fran, because I know you got little Francis, but for all the parents who are working from home and managing children in their full-time jobs. Fortunately, my 2 boys, Julian and Carter, are old enough that they're pretty much self-sufficient, but there are times where I say to myself, I am very fortunate that they are not 4 years old or little infants where you really have to be monitoring them around the clock. And I think it makes you appreciate teachers that much more during this time. So that's the biggest takeaway for me as we get into draft week.
Ben, we've got some sunshine today.
Yeah, I see that out there. I'm starting to get a little restless here. And the only time I really have to reflect on it is when you bring the attention to it at the top of the show. And I'm like, how is my life? Oh, actually, it's been kind of crappy. Thanks for bringing it up, Fran.
Well, the sun's out. You know, it's not windy today. You can go out. You can.
Yeah, but we had rain last night. So that means all the sticks in the wood saturated. Things are wet out there. It's muddy. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the fire going until at least like 3 or 4 today.
It's a rough life, man. It's a rough life.
These are the battles I'm going through on Wednesday afternoons.
All right, well, let's get into this. Before we jump into Through the Grapevine, real quickly, I just kind of want to talk through what next week's going to look like for us here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Make we're going to have our mock draft extravaganza, one of my favorite shows to put together every single year. The 3 of us, we're going to kind of go around the league. We're going to make all 32 selections, but we're not going to be the ones making the picks. We are reaching out to local beat writers, local experts, some national people as well, to make the picks based off of their expertise of that individual team. So it's going to be a lot of fun kind of diving around. We're going to try and create as accurate a mock draft as possible during the week of the draft. So we'll hit on that on Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday, excited to welcome in NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell. We'll hit on that. Offense on Tuesday, defense on Wednesday. We're going to go rapid fire, hit on as many players as possible with Greg, kind of get his takes. Obviously, the 3 of us we'll share our insights on those players as well. But just a final way to kind of look at this class, and we'll do that with Greg on Tuesday and Wednesday next week. For the first time ever as well, we will also be doing a nightly podcast, just little nightly recaps of what we see from the Eagles in the draft. So we'll hit on that Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, throughout draft weekend as well. So a lot of action we'll be bringing up to you right here on this feed. So make sure, obviously, if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe and you don't miss anything next week for the week of the draft. All right, guys, let's get Through the Grapevine here. First item, Mel Kiper released his mock draft, and it is out. He had Henry Ruggs from Alabama falling to the Eagles at 21. Perhaps most, maybe even more interesting, he's the 4th receiver off the board. Justin Jefferson from LSU, the 3rd receiver off the board ahead of him. Usually we don't see Henry Ruggs fall to 21. And on top of that, for Justin Jefferson to go ahead of him, I think it's very interesting. C-Mac, what is your big takeaway when you see that from Mel Kiper?
So if you're the Eagles, you don't have to give up any draft capital. You get a receiver who most put in the top 3 with Judy and Lamb, and you inject a high-octane playmaker into the offense. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, why would Jefferson go before Ruggs? One reason could be production. Jefferson tied for the FBS lead in receptions a year ago. But last week, we were talking about receiver superlatives, and I said Ruggs was my player, my day one receiver with the most upside because of that speed and that vertical threat ability. And Jefferson still showed enough speed at the combine. He has an inside-outside versatility, so he may appeal more to certain teams because of that, and he has a little bit of the bigger body. But to me, if you're the Eagles, and everyone knows that all the mocks have been having the Eagles going for a receiver, most likely it's been a receiver or linebacker there at 21, to not have to move up and to be able to get a player of Ruggs' caliber with that ability to take the top off of defense.
To me, the big thing is that, I think we all are so quick to say, oh, well, the top 3 receivers are Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and CeeDee Lamb. In some order, those are the top 3. And I think that this is just an example of that's not always the case. When you look at, all 32 teams are going to have these receivers stocked differently. And when you look at Justin Jefferson or Brandon Ayuk, and, some people feel like Denzel Mims or KJ Hamler, T. Higgins, you throw all these guys in there, Ruggs or Lamb or Jeudy may not be in the top 3 receivers for some teams. And so as the saying goes, it only takes one to feel that, oh, we like Justin Jefferson more than Henry Ruggs, or we like KJ Hamler more than CeeDee Lamb, or we like this guy more than, all it takes is one team. And now one of those players is falling down. And so, but that's the beauty of following the NFL draft. Ben, obviously, I know you are in full agreement with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But these 2 prospects have kind of swapped, and passed each other in the night for some reason through this whole draft cycle. I don't know what the questions were around Justin Jefferson coming off of the season, but I think some people thought he was more of a manufactured touch guy and he wasn't going to run particularly well, and shows up to Indy and runs 4.4. And now everybody's saying, oh, Henry Ruggs is the manufactured touch guy, and he's a raw route runner and has a lot of things to still learn as far as his route running ability to get on the field on Sundays. But I still think he has just as much upside and his value as a gadget player to stretch the field, not only vertically, but horizontally, like we're seeing everybody do across the NFL. I think that would be a great pick for Doug Peterson's offense, just like the way, McCole Hardman and Tyreek Hill fit into Andy Reid's offense. That's similar type of use and a similar type of scheme.
Sure. I think really all of those guys obviously bring supreme talent. And there's a bunch of other guys, a bunch of other talented receivers that really excite me with this transition to the NFL. All right, guys, let's get to the next one here. Peter King, on his Monday morning column, Football Week in America, went through the draft order and provided some nuggets on a bunch of teams. And here's what I'm thinking is just kind of go 4 nuggets at a time. I'll read through a couple, some of the highlights here. You pick one that stood out to you from each group of 4, and we'll hash it out a little bit. So first one, Cincinnati, he said unlikely to trade out of that top pick. Not too much of a surprise. Washington, no one thinks they pick anybody but Chase Young. Not much of a surprise there. Detroit Lions, defensive player or trade down. Could be Jeff Okudah or Derek Brown. They seem to be Matt Patricia types. But how about this idea from one general manager on Saturday? This is from the column. Said, I bet 40% of teams in the league have C.J. Henderson higher on their boards than Jeffrey Okudah. He's a better cover guy. So that's interesting. I thought that was a really cool nugget there from Peter King. And then the last one, the Giants, hard to see Dave Gettleman go anywhere but tackle in this urgent draft for the G-men. So, C-Mac, I go to you. Is there anything that stands out from those first 4 nuggets there from Peter King?
Well, you brought this up when we were evaluating the evaluators with the Giants, that Dave Gettleman, in his years with Carolina and his couple of years with the Giants, has never taken an offensive lineman in the first round. And not that that'll preclude him from doing so here. It's just an interesting fact here to take into consideration.
Ben, I thought it was really interesting, the note on C.J. Henderson, is how he bets 40% of teams in the league have Henderson higher on their boards than Okudah. And I guess it goes to the point I made in that last nugget about, Justin Jefferson over Henry Ruggs. Every team sees all these players differently. And, it might not be exactly what the consensus is amongst the media. But we know C.J. Henderson, we've talked about him a lot on this podcast, extremely talented player.
I don't know what Jeffrey Okudah really did from the end of the season to right now for anybody to question why he wouldn't be cornerback number one. I think CJ Henderson's a really talented player with a good upside in a man coverage scheme. He's going to lock down the perimeter for somebody. But what has Jeffrey Okudah done to question anything that he shouldn't be the first corner off the board? I think he's scheme versatile. I'm quickly going through my notes here to see if there's any red flags, cons. Did he have a bad tape? The Wisconsin game, I guess, was his worst tape as a Buckeye, but he's done nothing wrong to insinuate he will not be the first corner off the board.
What I read into that is mainly, would Detroit feel comfortable trading down and missing on Okudah? If they feel like, hey, maybe CJ Henderson and Okudah are very close and we're happy picking up, an extra 2, an extra 1, whatever it is, to say, okay, we'll pass on Okudah, get the extra ammunition, and get CJ Henderson. That, to me, is what I kind of read into that nugget. Or, of course, it could be somebody trying to feed that to Peter King to maybe drum up some interest in a CJ Henderson to, allow somebody else to follow them. So, obviously, look, all kinds of smoke being thrown around this time of year. All right, next 4 bullet points here, rounding out the top 10. Miami. Peter King says, I hear that Chris Grier and Brian Flores are very much against trading the farm to move up to get Joe Burrow, which some in the organization want to do. He also talked about Chris Grier being in Miami when they passed on Drew Brees in free agency, but also coming from Bill Parcells' school of availability being the most important ability. So some conflicting opinions in the building about, whether it's Justin Herbert or Tua Tagovailoa, or obviously the move up for Joe Burrow. It seemed that there was some buzz a couple weeks ago that, maybe they would be able to make a move up, package a few picks there to move up to number 1. Obviously, like you said at the top, Cincinnati unlikely to trade off of that spot. So that's interesting stuff there from Miami. With the Chargers, a quarterback or a long-term tackle makes the most sense. A GM friend of Tom Telesco's thinks that he's very high on Justin Herbert, but head coach Anthony Lynn is bullish on Tyrod Taylor, and maybe for more than just 1 year. He also called Tom Telesco a top 5 poker player general manager in the league. I thought that was a cool nugget. Jacksonville, he hears not quarterback for the Jaguars. The quote was, they really want to give Gardner Minshew a real shot. One friend of Caldwell was able to give that quote, and then the defensive impact player like a Swiss Army knife-ish Isaiah Simmons makes sense for the Jaguars. This isn't from Peter King, but I keep an eye out for them with a trade down as well with the Jaguars. And then last one here, Andrew Berry in Cleveland. Number 1, good friend of Joe Thomas and saw his value in his previous Cleveland tenure. Number 2, was most recently schooled in the Eagles' ethos of when in doubt, take an offensive lineman. And number 3, sees a tackle position, obviously on the Browns, in tatters. And number 4, he watches the Browns in 2019, saw Baker Mayfield running for his life. How does Berry not take one of the 4 hot prospect offensive tackles right here? There's a quote, though, said, I agree, one Browns watcher said from another team, but they love that Boise tackle, and maybe they think they can get him in the second round. Obviously talking about Ezra Cleveland, the athletic offensive tackle from the Boise State Broncos. So, C-Mac, I'll come to you. Of those 4 nuggets, very interesting stuff there from that group of teams. Anything that particularly stands out in your end?
For me, it's the shadow of Drew Brees, and how is that going to loom over the draft? And it was fascinating that Peter King brought up that Chris Grier was with the team in 2006 when that decision was made to go with Dante Culpepper over signing Drew Brees. And we know how that changed the fortunes for not just the Dolphins franchise, the Saints franchise, but the University of Alabama football team. What's interesting to me is that with Miami having 3 first-round picks, to me, it's almost like whichever way they decide to go at quarterback at 5, they can potentially soften the blow of a potential miss. And knowing that Flores is coming from the New England school of philosophy, you want to have as many picks as possible, that you can almost build the rest of the team well enough to hopefully mitigate that if that first-round pick, that quarterback, doesn't pan out as expected, that you still have a good team around it.
Yeah, Fran, I think it's most interesting just to see who feels most comfortable with their quarterback room right now, that they don't feel desperate, or potentially if they don't fall in love with one of the top prospects this year. Jacksonville obviously alluding to wanting to give Gardner Minshew a shot. The Chargers have Tyrod Taylor, who seems to be, the incumbent starter behind Phillip Rivers there. The question is Miami. They have Ryan Fitzpatrick. They have Josh Rosen. They have a quarterback room to survive the season. What if there's a chance, they really aren't falling in love with one of these kids, that they'd rather bolster the offensive line, add some weapons on this offense, and potentially look to a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields next year, which is another deep kind of quarterback group. So I think it's really interesting to look at those three teams, how they feel about their quarterback room, and if they are potentially content with who they have as the incumbent starter. The other thing with Cleveland potentially addressing a tackle, everybody knows they need a left tackle after Joe Thomas. What type of tackle are they going to use, though, with that offense? Baker Mayfield, a guy that likes to hold on to the ball, a little bit more mobile. Do you want a more athletic tackle? You now have Alex Van Pelt from the kind of Green Bay tree of outside zone. So do you want a tackle that's a little bit more, light on his feet in the zone scheme as opposed to a big mauler? So I think the scheme fit and the play profile of what tackle Cleveland's going to address is really interesting as well.
To me, I feel like you look at Tristan Wirfs, is he that kind of guy for them? But again, it's going to be very interesting to see which direction they ultimately go. I think that's a good point on your end. All right, so let's go to the next one here. New York Jets, big needs are at offensive tackle, wide receiver, and pass rusher. Joe Douglas, the general manager with a 6-year contract, knows that there is not a pass rusher worthy of the pick here, and he knows he can get a first-round caliber wideout at 48 in the second round. He sees best value by far here at tackle. If a value player like Mekhi Becton or Andrew Thomas is still on the board, I'm betting offensive tackle here for the Jets. So interesting, pretty strong take there from Peter King that it's an offensive tackle for New York. Number 2 here, Las Vegas. John Gruden's been grousing that he does not have a home run playmaker at wideout. Mike Mayock wants clean character guys. CeeDee Lamb seems pretty logical. I would throw in, I think, Henry Ruggs also kind of fits that mold as well. Certainly Jerry Jeudy as well. So all three of those receivers. I really feel like, wide receiver for sure to Las Vegas at pick 12. That's just my feel. San Francisco, Javon Kinlaw. Another defensive lineman in the first round. It sounds crazy. Maybe it is, but after all the first-round defensive line capital that the 49ers have used up, but Peter King hears that the Niners are desperate for a space-eating defensive tackle who can threaten the pocket, and that's what Kinlaw does. Interesting note there. I just really feel like it could be a receiver, and they're doing a lot of work, it seems. I don't know if you guys have been following who is meeting with who's chatting with who. They seem to be chatting up a lot of these big receivers, the Ruggs, the Lambs, and the Judys as well. So I'd keep an eye out for receiver there for San Francisco, something we've talked about for the last few weeks. And then last one, Atlanta, desperate for some edge presence. Atlanta signed Dante Fowler in free agency. Dimitroff could double dip with the second best edge rusher in the draft with Kayvon Chasen. And real quickly, my big takeaway from that is that last one. Remember, last year, Atlanta double dipped when they went heavy on offensive line. They signed a couple of free agents. It's not like they were home run signings, but guys that they felt could come in and start. And then what did they do in the draft? They drafted 2 offensive linemen in the first round on top of those guys. So, no, C-Mac, you've made this point previously. Just because they signed Dante Fowler does not mean, cross off, Kayvon Chasen or anybody else off the edge for this group. That was my big takeaway. C-Mac, what was your big takeaway from that group of points?
To me, it's the Niners, and you kind of touched on this, how the Niners are the wild card because offensive tackle, I think, is still in the picture for them. The thing with the receiver is, does Kyle Shanahan say, all right, you give me one of the big 3 and then we'll go to bat and give Jimmy Garoppolo another home run threat? Or does he say, I can wait and get a Jalen Reagor or a Lynn Bowden type and scheme those guys open into the offense? So that, I think the Niners being the wild card there, even though I know Peter King was very adamant that they're going Javon Kinlaw, it seems like the Niners could still go in a couple ways, especially on the offensive side.
Ben, what was your big takeaway there?
I just think of looking at the 49ers coming off of the Super Bowl loss, obviously re-geared to, be a contending team once again, just how flexible they can be in this draft, I think is a scary proposition. The fact going into the draft with a really well-built roster, I think it's just terrifying that they could kind of see how the board falls to them. If they get, maybe one of these top flight receivers or a top flight interior defensive tackle like Kinlaw, or maybe a tackle of the future. They had tackle issues last year, had to survive half the season with 2 backups at left and right tackle there. I just think that's a really scary proposition when that's a really good competitive roster right now. And then they're going to potentially get a number 1 or a number 2 at 3 big-time positions: interior defensive tackle, offensive tackle, or receiver. That's just a really scary proposition to kind of bolster an already dangerous team.
and this is a team that does not have a ton of ammo coming in. So I got to feel that they're trading out of one of those two spots as well, whether it's 13 or 31, maybe even both. I think they only have 4 picks, I think, in this draft, maybe 5. So that's certainly a team that I would count on moving off of one of those two spots by the time it's all said and done. All right, final 5 points here that we're going to hit on from Peter King. Dallas, the quote is, "It's too high for a center," said one personnel man, but they love the Michigan center, Cesar Ruiz, and they could trade down a few spots and still be sure of getting him. That there's an interesting plug-and-play air to Travis Frederick. Next one from Las Vegas again. Mike Mayock won't be able to pass on C.J. Henderson if he's there, and he would not be surprised with a Raiders trade-up for him, especially after they've missed on Eli Apple, failing his physical, and the Raiders obviously got outbid on Byron Jones as well. That's a good point from Peter King, I think, in terms of the corner position being important. A lot of people have plugged A.J. Terrell in there for the Las Vegas Raiders, so certainly something to keep an eye on. Philadelphia, what he talked about with the Eagles, he said, "Mox from Caribou to Carlsbad will give Philly a wide receiver, and I probably will too a week from today. Give me some time on that one." So Peter King will drop his last mock draft on Monday. And then the couple more here. New England, the quote is, "They love Justin Herbert, but enough to trade up for him." One rival general manager said the Pats do have 12 picks. That's the second most in this draft. I will say most of them are on day 3. They don't have a lot of top 100 picks in this group. If they want Justin Herbert, they likely have to be willing to part with 2021 first rounder and a trove of picks. After losing out on Hayden Hurst in their latest hunt for a tight end, no way the Pats could reach for versatile Notre Damer Cole Kmet here to solve the tight end problem, is there? So a couple interesting possibilities there for the Patriots. And then last one here, Seattle. Best quote that he mined from last week from an AFC general manager said, "Only 2 things are sure in this draft: Joe Burrow to the Bengals and John Schneider trades down in the first round." This is almost as crazy as the Dave Gettleman never trading down once. So in the 8 drafts since 2012, John Schneider has traded his first-round pick every year and twice in 2017 and 2019. So 8 first rounds, 10 trades. Whatever happens on draft weekend, my money is on Schneider to add a pass rusher, probably Jadeveon Clowney or Everson Griffin in the next 2 weeks. So big takeaways there. C-Mac, what was their biggest one?
So for me, I was looking at the possibility, could the Patriots really make this move up for Herbert? And the one trade that I went back and looked at was Atlanta. Back in 2011, Thomas Dimitroff going from 27 to 6 for Julio Jones. And the price really wasn't all that exorbitant. It was 2 firsts, a second, and 2 fourth-round picks. You brought up the point, Fran, that while the Patriots do have a ton of picks in this year's draft, there's no second-round picks. You're looking early in the draft, they have their first-round selection and 3 third rounds. The team that I would be intrigued by to watch would be Detroit at number 3 because of the Matt Patricia, Bob Quinn connection. Again, going to the philosophy of knowing the Patriots, they're going to miss on certain guys, that you have to be so right to think that you're going to go all the way up there and mortgage so many picks to get the guy, especially when there's been a lot of buzz all offseason about Jarrett Stidham and their faith in him and wanting him to develop, even though they're most likely going to bring in some sort of competition.
The only quarterback I feel kind of that I would match with the Patriots, and Ben, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. The only one that I feel from this group that I'd say, oh yeah, because Burrow's gone, take Joe Burrow out of it, is Tua. Like, you know, because I do feel that Tua has the best chance of all of them to drop a little bit further. I don't think Herbert's falling out of the top 5, top 6. I still believe Jordan Love is still going to go in the top 10, top 12. To me, like, Tua with the injuries, especially with everything going on, like, to me, like, that's the one that I wonder, like, all right, if he falls, you know, even if it's not all the way down to 23, if he falls to 17 or 16 or 19 or 20, do the Patriots then make that move up and maybe secure that? We know about the relationship between Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. Tua, I feel like, has that in terms of the decision-making and quick release. He's not the biggest arm, but certainly more than enough to fit what Bill Belichick looks for. I just feel that Tua is the guy that kind of fits what Bill Belichick and that offense have had over the last 2 decades plus with Tom Brady.
You know, it's really interesting to study this team because they haven't been in the quarterback market, but they kind of have, and they do have a type. And you know who my comp for Jake Fromm is? He reminds me a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think there's some guys like Jake Fromm and Jalen Hurts that might appeal a little bit more on the back end of round one, maybe early day two, to go get one of those guys with a lot of experience. Obviously, smart players have some limitations physically, but I think New England's okay with the physical limitations, and they'd obviously rather, a guy with the experience and the kind of senior presence like Fromm and Hurts have.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this whole quarterback shuffle goes next week at the draft.
And real quick, Fran, I think it's also interesting just for a fun kind of exercise. What if Las Vegas double dips at one of these positions, potentially taking two corners or two receivers? Obviously some teams aren't shy about just lighting up scoreboards these days, like San Fran and the Chiefs and the Rams, and maybe to bolster that offensive firepower, whether it's going to be Derek Carr or Marcus Mariota, the future there. Their receiver position is kind of dwindling right now. They have Zay Jones, Tyrell Williams. They got Nelson Aguilar in free agency, which is a good addition. But outside of that, not a whole lot of juice or upside with young guys. So if they could walk out of here with a CeeDee Lamb at 11 and maybe Ruggs at 19, man, that's a wild proposition to think about.
To me, like the wow factor of that would make them like, everybody's big winner of the draft for sure. Coming out of it.
And I also think 19 has great value. I think someone's going to come and really offer something to the Raiders at 19, which we see a lot of movement around 17 to 25 the past couple of years in that mid to late area of the first round, where if somebody's overvalued on their board and they want to go trade up and get them, I think 19 is a nice spot to maybe get out of that position and add a late one and a day two.
Yeah, pick. That's a good point. I like that. All right, guys, next point here. This is just another quick news item. Zach Bond, the linebacker from Wisconsin, tested positive for a diluted urine sample at the combine. Now, Zach Bond sent a letter to every team, all 32 clubs, explaining that it was due to all the water he drank before the weigh-in, and that diluted the sample. C-Mac, you and I have joked in the past at Senior Bowl and at Combine about how much water those guys drink just to add on a couple pounds. It looks like that came back to bite Zach Bond.
The thing here is, and I think we talked about this around the combine, is that you see the players doing a lot of water intake to try to get those weight numbers up. The one thing with Bond is that Schefter in his report noted that it's not going to be punished in the new collective bargaining agreement. Joe Thomas, the future Hall of Fame left tackle from the Browns, he was hit for a diluted sample of the combine, and he actually criticized the league on Twitter, saying that because of the amount of water that players are taking during this time, these tests, these diluted samples should not be as much of a surprise. So I think the prevailing thought is that Bond, who is getting into mock drafts late first round, it's not really going to hurt his draft stock, especially since he's being forthright with teams.
I don't imagine that this will have a huge impact. I don't think it'll move the needle too much on Zach Bond's overall draft stock. All right, guys, let's go to our superlatives over the last couple of weeks. We've kind of going position by position, offering fans a little bit of a preview today. We're going to do our last three, and we're going to start with quarterback, the best arm talent of the quarterback room on day one. C-Mac, we'll go to you.
So day one, I'm pretty much sticking with the core four guys for the quarterbacks here. And for best arm, I'm going with Justin Herbert. Jordan Love, very easy thrower of the football, but we got to see, Fran, you and I saw both he and Love up close at the Senior Bowl, and I thought that Herbert had the upper hand in this area. Even though I do like Love's ability to throw with anticipation, that caught my eye down in Mobile. But also when you look at the combine measurements where they measure your throwing speed, Herbert topped out Love here as well. So, and as much as Burrow is going to go number one and Tua is a very, very gifted passer, arm strength isn't the elite traits when you look at the two of them. So for the best arm of the ones that we're expecting to go day one here, I went with Justin Herbert out of Oregon.
All right, if I could just throw this out there, Fran, I have to be much more precise than you two here. I got to find a day two player. That's either round 2 or round 3. That means you get round 4 to priority free agent. C-Mac gets the top of the mountain. I got to make sure I'm picking those guys that aren't too good, but aren't going to fall to day 3. So I really got to be precise in hitting these picks here on day 2.
That has been the general theme for the last 3 weeks or so. But yeah,
it's all right. It's all right. I'm going to name myself for best accuracy next category here. But best arm on day 2, I think this was one of the easier picks here. Jacob Eason, huge arm. Obviously, that's probably his one redeeming trait, redeeming quality. That's why he gets all the Jay Cutler type of, comps and vibes from him. He threw the ball 63 miles an hour at the combine in the miles per hour test, which is really impressive. A lot more under center stuff at Washington when I go back and watch his tape. So I really like him in that pro style system, turning his back to the defense. They really just need to limit this kid. If you get him in a good play action, shot play type of offense, and you can kind of pull his reins back and play a little bit more like a Matt Schaub, and, don't always have to be a hero with that right arm, which is impressive, but it gets him into trouble as well. But obviously one of the more live, strong arms of this draft.
Yeah, I think that was a slam dunk pick. For me, day 3, I'm going to go with a guy we haven't talked about for a couple months here. Was not invited to the combine. C-Mac, you and I saw him up live close at the Shrine Bowl, and that's Tommy Stevens from Mississippi State. Penn State transfer, athletic kid, was used all over the field kind of as a Taysom Hill type weapon for the Nittany Lions before transferring down with Joe Moorhead down to Mississippi State. But Stevens has a really impressive arm. He can push the ball vertically down the field. He can fit it into a tight window. Obviously just needs to be reined in as a passer. Like, he's just not where he's only started 9-10 games in his entire career. So this is a guy that very, very green, but I think he's got some tools to work with. He's just, he's going to need a lot of development to get there. So Tommy Stevens, my pick for best arm on day 3. Let's go best accuracy and touch. I paired these two together. C-Mac, what do you got?
Like this category here, and I'm going with the number 1 overall pick, Joe Burrow. And there are 2 throws that you need to go back and look at from the national championship game. First, the 52-yard touchdown to Jamar Chase. It was 40 yards in the air, pinpoint accuracy, beautiful touch on it. And then another touchdown. This was in the second quarter to Chase as well in the red zone, a 14-yard score where Burrow had to throw Chase open. There was no window. It wasn't like he has to see it before he rips it. He threw it perfectly in the backcourt in the end zone. Good coverage on the play, but still the touch was so spot on. So Joe Burrow gets my vote here for best accuracy and touch among the day 1 quarterbacks.
All right, this one's a bit of a dice roll here, Fran. I'm not sure if he's going to squeeze into day 2, but I'm going to hold out hope. He's a late round 3 pick. He's only a 1-year starter, which is really interesting. But when you go and look at his tape, watch Anthony Gordon out of Washington State, who took over for Gardner Minshew in that air raid system of Mike Leach out there in Washington. When you put on his tape, I know it's a spread them out kind of, point guard offense, but this guy had really good accuracy, really good touch, really good placement, the ability to layer throws with different trajectories, different velocities. I mean, 71% completions on nearly 700 pass attempts. I don't care if it's routes against air. That's really impressive. And I know they have a history of having accurate quarterbacks that never really panned out into the NFL. But I thought he showed up to the Senior Bowl and looked comfortable, looked confident, and he's only a 1-year player. I think he has a lot to show, and he could be a guy in training camp and in the preseason that kind of steals some headlines wherever he lands.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I know there are a lot of people that are big fans of Anthony Gordon. For me, day 3, I'm going to go back to the Shrine Bowl. My top quarterback from that game was James Morgan from FIU. Good-sized kid. He's not the most athletic. I think his arm is solid. But to me, the biggest thing that stands out to me about him was his accuracy and his touch to all 3 levels of the field. Some shades of Nate Sudfeld. Some of the things I saw from Nate out in Indiana, I've kind of seen from James Morgan throughout the course of his college career. I think he has a similar kind of skill set to develop into a backup quarterback. So James Morgan, my pick for best accuracy and touch on day 3 of this draft. Best mobility, C-Mac, we'll go to you for day 1.
I tried to give different player each of the accolades, but in this case, I'm going back to Justin Herbert. I think Burrow is very underrated in this area, but Herbert is going to give that dual threat dimension to whichever team that chooses him. Yes, he is 6'6", but he's athletic. Ran an unofficial sub 4.7 40 at the combine. He's not a statue in the pocket. And he actually is the last game of his career, the Rose Bowl, against Wisconsin, had 3 rushing touchdowns in that contest.
So, Fran, my pick here, I think he's going to slide out of the first round and be one of the first selections on day 2. And it's no secret who Jalen Hurts is, coming from Alabama over to Oklahoma. His athleticism, his mobility, obviously his number 1 trait. Showed up to the combine, really ran a really impressive 4.59 at 222 pounds. And I would go back and watch him against Oklahoma 2 years ago when Tua was the starter in that championship game, or excuse me, the semifinal against Oklahoma. They ran some jet sweeps to him. They ran some wildcat plays where he had to meet Kenneth Murray one-on-one in the hole in the low red zone. This guy's got a lot of power, a lot of athleticism. I don't know if he's a down-to-down quarterback or not, but we've obviously seen enough of the Taysom Hills and the change of pace guys in the NFL that his skill set has a value. So whatever you want to call him, he's probably the most athletic day 2 quarterback, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up going in this draft. For me, I'm going to go to the Senior Bowl. Shea Patterson, look, there are issues with him as a passer, right? But I think when you look in terms of what are the traits that he can hang his hat on, his mobility, his ability to escape, he's an athletic kid. That's something that he certainly has the ability to bust out on the field at any point. Was the number 1 dual threat quarterback coming out of high school a few years ago when he initially committed to Ole Miss and then obviously transferred up to Michigan. I think when you look at Shea Patterson, his movement ability is something that, that's a strength for him moving forward into the NFL.
And Fran, just to kind of paint Shea Patterson forward, my comp for him is Luke McCown, who also had, that athletic upside. We all know he played some receiver in spot duty for the Lions early in his career, but has carved out, obviously, a pretty impressive career as a backup. That can be Shea Patterson. Obviously, a lot of talent, a lot of upside, a lot of athleticism. Let's see if he could kind of rein it in between the ears and carve out a good kind of backup role for somebody with that upside to maybe be a wildcat quarterback and a change of pace like a Taysom Hill.
That's what he's got to kind of bank on moving forward into the NFL for sure. All right, that last one for quarterback. Best intangibles. C-Mac, we'll go with you.
So hard to go between Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa, because I love Burrow, how he overcame struggles and injury in college, was a 2-year captain at LSU. We know his run to the national championship, and the way he embraced the LSU community was beautiful. But I went with Tua here. Came in as a true freshman to win off the bench to win the national title game for Alabama. This is a guy who's always cool, calm, and collected. Sort of like Carson Wentz, he's deeply religious, and he's not someone I think you ever have to worry about off the field. And this is from Dane Brugler's The Beast draft guide. Phenomenal read. Nick Saban is not someone who tosses bouquets around lightly, but he called Tua as important as any player that this program has ever had. So I went with Tua Tagovailoa as my player with the best intangibles, the quarterback on day 1 with the best intangibles.
If he drops, he's a Patriot. I'm telling you. If he drops, he's a Patriot.
This one was pretty easy for me, Fran, and best intangibles as a day 2 player. I think he's going to be a 3rd-round pick. But Jake Fromm at the University of Georgia, coming out as a junior, feels like he's been there forever because he was a starter as a true freshman, taking them to the national championship game, and really a couple of plays away from beating Alabama in that overtime that Tua stole the show. But I would challenge anybody to go watch QB1. I think it was season 2 on Netflix while you're in quarantine, and watch a couple episodes of Jake Fromm in high school transitioning into college. Really, really impressive kid, both on the field and off the field. Great family, just really good head on his shoulders, excellent character, IQ, has a clear kind of conscience about his life and decision-making. Just a really good kind of structured kid that you want to be around. He's really infectious. And it's no secret why he showed up to Georgia, was the immediate starter, really kind of made Justin Fields transfer to Ohio State because he was the incumbent starter there. But a guy that's played some good ball for Georgia and one of the more intangibly kind of exciting players in this entire draft.
For me, day 3, I went Nate Stanley. I remember, you guys know, I love talking to players, at the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl and the Combine about their teammates or their opponents. I was talking to Michael Ojemudia, the corner from Iowa, and I said, hey, who was the leader for Iowa? And I didn't even finish the sentence. He said, Nate Stanley. And he was like, 3-year captain, set the tone for everybody. Always kind of, some of the things that you talked about, C-Mac, with Tua, in terms of like, very even keeled and always kind of, right. Even when things weren't going right, he always, kind of kept that same attitude, kept that same face for the guys on the sideline and always kind of inspired his teammates. So I went with Nate Stanley there for my pick on day 3. All right, let's go to tight end, guys. Best receiver, C-Mac, day 1. This is tough for C-Mac because not a lot of tight ends we're talking about here on day 1.
Well, that's the thing, is there's probably not going to be a day 1, so I'm kind of going in the mix here with Ben here. But I went with Adam Trotman out of Dayton. First team Associated Press FCS All-American selection, the Pioneer League Offensive Player of the Year, 70 receptions, 916 yards, 14 touchdowns, finished his school as Dayton's all-time leading receiver. So I went with Adam Trotman as the best receiver of the quote-unquote day one tight ends here. So it's going to be interesting to see where these guys end up going up, because it seems like the top of the class here will be day two.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a round one grade on any tight end this year. I would not be shocked if there are 0 tight ends going on day one of the draft. But I had a trouble picking between 2 tight ends here. I really like Bryson Hopkins out of Purdue, productive player, reminds me a lot of Zach Ertz here with the Philadelphia Eagles. But I'd be remiss to not pick Harrison Bryant here at Florida Atlantic, really dominantly productive player, and Lane Kiffin's spread offense there at Florida Atlantic. Just throw on his numbers every season. Last year, 65 catches, 1,000 yards, over 2,000 yards in his entire career, 16 touchdowns, 148 receptions. Now, he may not be a traditional wide tight end in the NFL, but he knows how to get open and catch the football in a heavy pass offense there. So productive player, Harrison Bryant.
For me, day 3, I went with a guy, I'm talking about best receiver. How about a guy who played receiver for his career at LSU? And that's Stefan Sullivan. Was a big-time receiver, a starting receiver for that team early in his career. Made the transition this past season to more of an inside slot, a big slot, and then goes to the Senior Bowl, plays as a tight end, and didn't shy away from blocking drills and did a good job on contact. So I'm going to go Stefan Sullivan, a guy that can certainly get down the seam and make some plays in the passing game. Best blocker, C-Mac, we'll go with you for day 1 tight ends.
So this is the lose slowly portion of the podcast. I went with UCLA's Devin Asiasi. Go back to his high school days, played both tight end and defensive end, and there are a number of schools that want him to play defensive end at the collegiate level, but he always wanted to be a tight end, and I think that toughness shows up. Now, there's a lot of off-field maturity questions. He started in Michigan, only lasted 1 season, and transferred, had a 3-game suspension at UCLA. So there are questions you have to figure out there, but at least of this upper tier group, I think Devin Asiasi is a little underrated, going under the radar here, but I would put him as the best blocker of this group.
Yeah, so there wasn't a whole lot of players to choose from here, Fran. This is a dominant tight end group as far as the flex position, those bigger receivers that spend a lot of time in the slot. I wanted to go with Jared Pinkney out of Vanderbilt. He's 260 pounds, has experience putting his hand in the turf, but he only played 8 games this year. So I'm going to go with Cole Kmet out of Notre Dame. Huge, broad tight end, 262 pounds. Love his hand placement, runs his feet, blocking in the trenches there. Really does a good job of staying connected to blocks with his balance there. He'll even come across the formation on some of those wham blocks and split zones and really kind of give it to some edge players and defensive ends. So I really like his size. Really isn't an A player in the pass game or blocking, but I think he's a B plus in both, which I think has a lot of upside and kind of resembles the same trajectory as like a George Kittle coming out of Iowa.
That's a good point. For me, for day 3, I went with a guy that I know all 3 of us like, and that's Thaddeus Moss from LSU. To me, just a bulldog, in the run game. He's a good pass protector as well. Obviously, his dad, a Hall of Fame receiver, and Randy Moss, but this guy makes his bones, blocking. He's a really, really fun player to watch at the point of attack. So I went with Thaddeus Moss, very versatile player, can be lined up in a number of different spots and shows the ability to win as a blocker. All right, best technician, day 1. C-Mac, what do you got?
So Ben touched on him already, and my favorite tight end of this group, Harrison Bryant out of Florida Atlantic, the first non-Power 5 player to win the Mackey Award. And, going between technician, receiver, just love the way that he sets up defenders, the way he runs his routes. And then going back to the combine, I thought his athletic and positional workouts were off the charts. So easily could have put him in the best receiver category, but I liked Harrison Bryant here for best technician.
I was going to go with Devin Asiasi. You stole that one already. I just think he does a lot of things really well, just from a fundamental standpoint. Really good getting off the ball, which helps him in blocking, helps him kind of roll off the line of scrimmage and threaten defenders vertically immediately. But I'm going to go with Adam Trotman out of Dayton. And the reason I say he's the best technician, because he has to be. He doesn't have a whole lot of redeeming qualities. He's not the fastest. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest. But the way they use him, it's all about being deliberate. A lot of pro-style elements. So a lot of play action concepts, 3-level stretches, play action boot concepts. They like leaking him vertically, a lot of double moves. So you have to be really deliberate and sell those, the run action, sell the double moves. In order to do that, you have to be deliberate and you have to be a technician in understanding the pacing and setting up defenders. So a guy that looked really good in Indy, running a 4.8 at 256 pounds, but not the biggest guy, not the strongest guy, not the fastest guy, but a productive and a smart player. Some of the names I've written down, like a Tony Scheffler or an Anthony Fasano type of player that I think could be in this league for a good 8 to 10 years.
So for me, I went with Josiah DeGuara from Cincinnati. I think he's just a very sneaky player, getting off the line of scrimmage, sneaky as a route runner. He's got some versatility to be able to line up in a number of spots, can win as a receiver, as a blocker. He's a well-rounded player, competitive kid. I just think he's of the guys we're talking about on day 3, I just feel like he's the savviest of that group at the tight end spot. All right, last one, highest upside at tight end, day 1, C-Mac.
I went with Missouri's Albert Okwuegbunam. We look from a size standpoint, 6'5", 258 pounds, looks the part, chiseled, caught everyone's eyes in Indy with a 4.47 in the 40. Injuries limited his production at Missouri, but his ball skills are very good. So for biggest upside, I went with Albert Okwuegbunam.
Man, we're dialed in, C-Mac. That was going to be my pick as well. And I was going to challenge you, Fran, and say last summer or even the summer before that, Albert Okwuegbunam was the consensus tight end number 1, had a really dominant sophomore campaign with Drew Lock, kind of dwindled a little bit in the remaining 2 years. But we're talking tight ends with really good size. I think there was only 5 or 6 tight ends over 255 pounds in Indianapolis. And the fact that he was 258, 6'5", ran a 4.49, and obviously has the experience with his hand in the turf. But just to throw in another name in here, I really like the upside of Dominic Wood-Anderson, who was the number 1 JUCO tight end 2 years ago, went to the University of Tennessee. Good player, good size, 261 pounds, will get after you blocking a little bit, soft, pillow hands, just obviously caught in kind of a dysfunctional Tennessee Volunteer team the past 2 years. But I think he has some upside in the NFL.
For me, I went with Giovanni Ricci, a player we got to see up close at the Shrine Bowl.
Love that.
Yeah, converted receiver, can work vertically down the field, can line up as an H-back, as a fullback, in line, in the slot. Shades of Trey Burton with Giovanni Ricci. I like Giovanni Ricci. I think he's got some upside if you're talking about a day 3 pick, especially late in the draft. I'm a big fan of what this kid brings from Western Michigan. All right, let's lastly go to corner, guys. Best man-to-man ability. C-Mac, day 1, corner, best man-to-man cover.
So it goes back to top of the show, and we were talking about Peter King and his draft nuggets, and he talked about how some teams, he wouldn't be surprised, the one GM, that 40% of the teams have C.J. Henderson over Jeff Okudah. Just his athletic and position workouts at the Combine were just absolutely sensational, and you can see that cover man ability on his game tape. So to me, I know Jeff Okudah is going to be the top corner in this draft class in terms of where they're selected, but C.J. Henderson, just very, very good upside, and that athleticism just off the charts.
All right, Fran, I was struggling between 2 guys here. I was going to go with Cameron Dantzler just because I can pronounce it better. Help me out here with the Auburn corner, Noah
Igbinoghene.
Right. Does he have a nickname yet? Are we calling him Iggy?
We're calling him Noah.
All right, we're going with Noah. When you put on this kid's tape, man, he ran 4.48 at the Combine. Experienced player in the SEC the last 2 years. 18 PBUs, former track star, converted receiver. Look at his PBUs the past season. PBU, press man slant against Jamar Chase. PBU, slot fade, press man against Devontae Smith. Press man slant against Van Jefferson. Literally a who's who, kind of a victim list here, getting PBUs against some of the top receivers, all in press man, one of the best man-to-man abilities. He's gotten a lot of buzz to maybe slide into the first round. I think he's probably one of the first picks off the board on day 2, but a guy that's going to come and lock down receivers on the outside or potentially even slide into nickel because of that man-to-man ability.
I've talked with some evaluators who have Igbinoghene in the top 20, top 25 players overall in this class. So wow. This is a guy with a very, very high ceiling, very competitive, very, very fun player to study. All right, let's go day 3 for me. I'm going to go deep sleeper, guys. I'm going to go Manny Patterson from Maine. All right, small corner, 5'8", 5'9", 184 pounds. This guy will run around all day. He's got some top-end speed, but I love the way he competes. He's a really impressive athlete and was really productive. 57 pass breakups in 40 starts.
He had 22 last year in 2018
Yeah.
for him, 22 PBUs and 3
Yeah.
picks, so 25 total in one season.
And those were his only 3 picks of his career. So that is going to be a little bit of a knock on him. But still, this is a guy that I think has some man-to-man ability. You're just going to knock the size for sure with Manny Patterson.
And the one thing with Manny Patterson, Fran, is the reason his buzz kind of died, he tore his ACL this year. I think it was early in the season. He's actually getting back on his feet and is able to do some testing. But everybody knew of him going into the summer with his profile and his production. But obviously the injury kind of killed his buzz. Being at the University of Maine, obviously his name just kind of wasn't in the news.
Let's go to most instinctive corner. C-Mac, what are you for day one?
So we talked about C.J. Henderson for man-to-man ability. I'm going with Jeff Okudah from Ohio State for instincts. The unanimous All-American selection is so technically sound, and loved his positional workout that we got to see in Indianapolis. But just one penalty. The one thing that stands out among many things with his game, just one penalty last season. Played for a number of coordinators there for the Buckeyes. But when you have the ability to play the other team's top receiver, you're only committing one penalty throughout the course of an entire season. It shows that you have a good awareness and for all the things that they ask him to do in that Buckeyes defense. So Jeff Okudah was my selection for most instinctive.
All right, so C-Mac, I'm going kind of the other way with this. My guy is really grabby. He's really physical. He gets penalties all the time. But that's really in man coverage. It's his zone coverage that he shows those instincts really well on. And that's Reggie Robinson out of Tulsa, who I've been calling the day 2 version of Jeffrey Okudah. Because when you're looking at corners that are 6 foot, 200 pounds, can run in the 4.4s in broad 10.5, feet, there's only 3 in this entire draft: Okudah, C.J. Henderson, and Reggie Robinson. And when you put on Reggie Robinson's highlights or his tape or whatever you want to look at, he makes a variety of plays in all different schemes. Press man, off man, cover 2, and a lot of nice picks and PBUs in that zone coverage where he is clearly has an understanding of route concepts and how offenses are trying to attack him. And I love seeing that in zone, letting him pass off receivers, understanding who's trying to attack his area of the field. So he's a player I've compared to a Aqib Talib or a James Bradbury, and I really like his upside. He ran 4.4 at the combine, Fran. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, broaded 11 feet, really explosive player. You can watch him against Tylan Wallace, Gabriel Davis, James Prochet at SMU, 4 blocked kicks in his career, 41 games played, 2,500 snaps. I could go on and on here. This is a really good player.
So for me, day 3, I went with a guy that has really done a nice job throughout the course of the pre-draft process. A productive kid. This is Essang Bassi from Wake Forest. From a size standpoint, only 5'9", 191 pounds, but 50 ball disruptions, 45 pass breakups to go with 5 picks over 40 starts. So this is a guy that has gotten his hands on a lot of footballs. Goes to the Senior Bowl, goes down, competes. I thought he was a little bit up and down, but he competed throughout the entire week. And then he goes to the combine, runs 4.4 flat, and jumps out of the gym. I think when you look at Bassi on film, the instincts, his play recognition, his route recognition ability was what stood out most to me about him. So he was my pick for most instinctive player on day 3.
Hey, Fran, I feel like we see those instincts a lot on these kind of zone and off corners more. Essang Bassi rarely played press man, but I think because of that, they just seem to have a better understanding of everything happening in front of them. I don't know if it's just kind of a visual thing with those off corners.
Yeah, I think so. You certainly just have there's more sample size to be able to see it. To me, when I look at instincts from a man coverage standpoint, I want to see a guy that can mirror, at the top of a route, stay in a receiver's hip pocket on, dig routes and comebacks and things like that. But when you're talking about off coverage, you can see, he's got everything in front of his field of vision. He's able to make a break on a route in front of him, and you kind of see that a little bit more often. So, C-Mac, we'll go best ball skills, day 1. Who do you got?
So for ball skills, this is one of your boys, Fran. Trevon Diggs out of Alabama. Now, he started his career there in Tuscaloosa as a 2-way player, finished with 21 career pass breakups, always around the ball, 4 career interceptions, long player. There's a player who also could fit in this category, but I'm going to save him for our last one. So for ball skills, I went with Trevon Diggs out of Alabama.
Yeah, for my day 2 pick here, Fran, which I've seen some mock drafts, him sliding into round 1 here, and that's Utah corner Jalen Johnson, who I think has excellent ball skills in this draft. And when I say ball hawk, and I have written down in his notes, this kid is not looking for pass breakups. He has a my ball approach. He has great tracking down the field, really, really tries to take that ball away. And you've seen it with his 21 pass breakups and 7 interceptions in his career. So Jalen Johnson in that really talented Utah Ute defense.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the way Jalen Johnson plays the game. For me, Brice Hall. This is a guy that was in first-round mocks all through the spring and the summer, broke his leg midway through his senior season, but was always incredibly productive on the football. 43 ball disruptions on 39 starts. He had 5 picks with 38 PBUs. So I think when you're talking about a guy who can find the football, that's one of Brice Hall's best traits. He's lacking a little bit in terms of top-end speed and quickness in and out of breaks, but big kid at 6'1", over 200 pounds, who can go and find the football in the air. Last one for the corners, most competitive, C-Mac, day one.
Another one of your boys here, Fran, someone who we didn't get to see at the Senior Bowl, and that's Jeff Gladney out TCU. Violent tackler, small but plays big. I could have easily gone with him for ball skills because he had 43 career pass breakups there with the Horned Frogs. So I went with Jeff Gladney as the most competitive, since he adds all this stuff from the way he plays the game as well as the ability to go get the football. It's similar to how Ben was talking about that my ball philosophy. You see that a lot with Jeff Gladney.
C-Mac, we're dialed in here. I don't know if we're working off the same Google drive sheet right here, but I had Jeff Gladney as well. I thought he was more of in my, day 2 kind of range there. Physical player, will mix it up. Reminds me a lot of the way Jair Alexander came out of University of Louisville a couple years ago. But another guy I'll throw out here is Malik Robertson at La Tech.
Thank you. That's a good one.
He's a day 2 player. He may squeeze into day 3 there, but some of the names I've written down, he's undersized. He's 5'9", 185, but he reminds me a lot of a Pac-Man Jones. And he has some plays where he knocks the head off of a couple of receivers on some shallow crosses and over the middle of the field. Experienced player, All-American actually, a second-team All-American at La Tech. Productive player, 14 picks, 34 PBUs. I don't know where he gets drafted, Fran, but a guy that I really like his play profile.
Another guy who I really like watching on film for me, day 3, Dane Jackson from Pitt, senior starter, went to the Senior Bowl. He reminds me of Jalen Mills, like everything about him, like the way he carries himself, his competitiveness, his ability to find the football, his toughness downhill. I really like a lot of what I saw from Dane Jackson on film. So good stuff there, guys. Covered pretty much. I think we covered every position over the last few weeks as we get ready for next week's draft. Let's go now to our mock draft roundup. This week, I teased at the top of the show, Dane Brugler dropped a 7-round mock draft. So he drops the beast last week. He does a 7-round mock for this week. We're just going to go through these picks real quick, and we'll just kind of respond as we go through. Number 1 in the first round, Kenneth Murray, the linebacker from Oklahoma. Seems to be one of the hotter names for the Eagles in a lot of recent mock drafts, from Daniel Jeremiah. We've seen, I believe, Todd McShay. Now you've got Dane Brugler as well. Kenneth Murray is a guy that, to me, has just grown on me throughout the course of the process. I love being around him out at the combine. Ben, I know you've been on the Kenneth Murray train for a long time as well.
I just love his presence in the middle of the defense there. One of the more impressive stack linebackers with his size, sideline to sideline range, more of a sub-package rusher than a coverage piece. But at 245 pounds, they use him a lot in different twists and blitzes. And if you think you're going to put some third down scat running back on him in pass protection, good luck out there. And he's just a really imposing player that I think would be an upside player and a playmaker in pretty much any defense in the NFL.
Second round, he's got the Eagles selecting Jalen Reagor, who falls from round 1 and goes to the Eagles at 53. Now, it should be noted that the receivers seem to fall a little bit in this draft with Dane, so that could be something interesting to follow. But Jalen Reagor from TCU falling to the second round, Eagles scoop him up, the speedster who lined up mostly outside but can be used in a lot of different ways. C-Mac, got to be happy if you're able to get Kenneth Murray round 1 and then to walk away from round 2 with Jalen Reagor.
You get your quarterback of the defense there, and then I know fans are going to be saying, well, where's the receiver to still get a big play guy who's great yards after the catch, has that outside-inside versatility, will high point the ball in the red zone. Just a nice piece. And, again, the fact that you don't have to give up additional draft capital to be able to still sit back and get him would be absolutely phenomenal.
And just to bring this full circle, Fran, who was the last guy we took in the first round out of the University of Oklahoma?
That would be Lane Johnson.
And that would be, and who is our second round pick? That would be Zach Ertz. So if we go with a Kenneth Murray and a Jalen Rieger, I could see a similar type of presence there and being fixtures of this franchise for a long time.
I like that a lot. All right, well, let's go to the third round. And Dane is going right after your heart here, Ben. He goes for Reggie Robinson, the corner from Tulsa.
Right there on day 2, just like I said, never doubted it for a second. Day 2 version of Jeffrey Okudah, really impressive player. I think would fit right into this defense. Honestly, he seems like he is a mix of everything we kind of had at this position because he has the size of Rasul Douglas. He has the kind of speed of a Ronald Darby. He has the presence of a Jalen Mills. He has that kind of profile of a Sidney Jones. He's like everything we've had at that position the past couple of years. And to get him in the third round, I think is one of the steals of the draft.
So round 4, there's a trio of picks here. James Prochet, the slot receiver, who is very, very productive for SMU. Great hands, savvy route runner as well. A.J. Dillon, the running back from Boston College. Love the fit there. I wonder if A.J. Dillon doesn't come off the board by the end of Friday night on day 2. And then Geno Stone. Ben, I know you're a fan of Geno Stone as well, the instinctive safety from Iowa. Guys, how do you react to this? Ben, we'll start with you with that trio of picks.
Well, Fran, after those first 4 players, if it goes Kenneth Murray, Jalen Rieger, Reggie Robinson, James Prochet, the next 4 picks can be Mickey Mouse and Scooby-Doo for all I care. That's a great first 4 picks there. But A.J. Dillon, he's starting to be one of the darlings kind of on day 3 here because if you need a big bruiser back, is what I call him, between the tackles, short yardage type of guy, there really aren't a whole lot of backs with size this year.
Not. Yep.
And he's every bit of 245 pounds, ran a really impressive 4.53. Reminds me a little bit of the throwback TJ Duckett with the Falcons in the 2000s there. He was a great change of pace player with some good power and kind of breakaway speed there. A guy that I think can take away a lot of the kind of wear and tear for somebody between the tackles. We saw what Jordan Howard did for the Eagles in that midseason stretch where they really kind of hit their stride in the run game and allowing Miles Sanders to be the perimeter back. I think having that kind of thunder and lightning is an important kind of complement system for any offense and backfield.
I agree with your point that there's the supply and demand. There aren't a lot of big power backs in this draft. So certainly with A.J. Dillon, that could play with him rising up the board a little bit. And certainly him testing the way he did out in Indianapolis will help him as well. To close out these last 2 picks, C-Mac, I want to go to you for these 2 because, again, he went for your guy, round 5. He went with the edge rusher from North Dakota State, Derek Tuska, a man pulling at C-Mac's heartstrings in the 5th round. And then Kamal Martin, the big physical linebacker from Minnesota, in the 6th round. So, C-Mac, your reaction there to the final 2 picks?
Look, just if this were the draft haul for the Eagles, I will do the Tootsie Slide on TikTok. Okay, that's just how excited I would be to see the Eagles come out with this haul. And I'm a big Tuska fan. We saw him at the Shrine Bowl. High motor, good technician, not an elite athlete. He reminds me, if you're an Eagles fan, of like a Steven Means, a guy who is just going to be a pain in the rear to go against in practice day in and day out because he's going to be going 110% all the time. Just love the tenacity he brings to the game. But just top to bottom for what the Eagles would have accomplished in this draft class, I would love to be able to channel Dane Brugler's mind for this. This to me would be a great haul, and I'm a huge fan.
Well, hold on a second there, C-Mac.
I have one question. What is a Tootsie Slide?
Drake came up with it. It's a new dance craze that's going out there. So
I got nothing for it.
And C-Mac, really fast, I think we all need to kind of go full circle here on Derek Tuska because he played at North Dakota State. He's from South Dakota. He doesn't look the part. But go look into this kid. High school, linebacker, safety, running back, receiver, tight end, long snapper, place kicker, and punter. 5-year starter on the basketball team, 5-year starter on the track and field team, 2-time All-State linebacker. This kid is a ridiculous athlete. I know he was out in South Dakota. We might have to go ask Carson Wentz about him in his North Dakota State days. I'm not sure if they overlap, maybe a season, maybe 2, but a really intriguing player. I don't know where he gets drafted, but one of the more fun kind of prospects to dig into.
So excellent stuff there from Dane Brugler. You can follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. Just excellent stuff all year round, but obviously especially this time of year with the draft just a week away. All right, let's get to the next segment here, guys. It's time now for Pick 6.
Now it's time for Pick 6.
All All right, guys. So this week on Pick Six rumors we are buying stock in, and obviously a lot of rumors flying around the NFL landscape at this point, but 6 that we can definitely see happening. And I'll start things off here. Ian Rappaport, Rap Sheet, reporting that the Giants are one of the teams up top that are willing to move down in round 1. Now, keep in mind, a couple weeks ago, we said Dave Gettleman has never traded back before. I think I might be buying it this year as a possibility. You know, you have all the offensive tackles. I'm really having trouble pegging which tackle I feel is the best fit for him, because I feel a lot of those guys, you know, I could see Dave Gettleman going that way. You know, whether you have Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, Mekhi Becton, Andrew Thomas, all of those guys I feel could be Dave Gettleman type. So, you know, to me, would not rule out, and obviously Isaiah Simmons, you throw him in there as well, would not rule out a trade down from the New York Giants. So I'm definitely buying stock on that one.
What's interesting, Fran, is there's also rumblings that they could be in the Derek Brown market as well.
It's so absurd.
It is, but at the same time, if that's what he likes to build in the trenches, he figures that he is a versatile piece there. We've talked that they're going to want to improve the pass rush, and he's someone who, you know, can play both kind of inside on the edge if you need him to, up and down that line. The whole situation there would be very fascinating, but maybe you figure you can trade it back a few spots, you know, get another premium pick to maybe get an offensive tackle late round 1, somewhere early day 2, or maybe even package those to go back up for one of these top 4 if they happen to fall, and still have a chance to get Derek Brown. So that was just looking into why that could be a possibility there is wildly fascinating. But I can only imagine Giants fans if somehow Derek Brown is the guy they go with in round 1.
All right, C-Max, so what's your first one? What rumor are you buying stock in right now?
I'm going to go that Justin Herbert will be selected before Tua Tagovailoa. And there's been buzz from Dolphins reporters that they favor Herbert over Tua. You look into the medical background, and you know the inability for one of the unique characteristics of this year's draft is the team doctors are not going to be able to examine him. Justin Herbert has been clean throughout the pre-draft process, was very good at the Senior Bowl, showed up well at the Combine. This could be a Miami looking at an Alex Smith, Aaron Rodgers situation. I don't buy the notion that Tua is going to slide too far, but at the very least, I'm sort of coming to grips that it looks like Herbert, or I'll buy stock in that Herbert will go in the draft before Tua.
I almost made this a bold prediction segment, like 6 bold predictions, and my bold prediction would have been that Tua falls out of the top 15.
The top 15.
Yeah, if I'm going to be bold, if I'm going to go out on a limb there, that would have been my pick. Ben, you got any rumors for us that you're buying stock in at this point?
Well, my first one was going to be the Herbert to Miami. That's kind of really gained some steam over the past couple of days. You know, Mike Garafolo has reported that Mel Kiper as well has Herbert going ahead of Tua. And it's just a matter of maybe a scheme fit there, and maybe more of a sure thing with this potential offseason coming, you know, with a lot of questions about how much time we're going to have with these prospects to get ready. That's why I just wonder, you know, the current quarterback situations, and with this kind of turbulent offseason, if there's a chance maybe one of these teams get a little bit shy about one of these top quarterbacks. And we're seeing more and more kind of interesting buzz towards the later of the draft. If Tua slides or Jordan Love slides, we saw Daniel Jeremiah mock Jordan Love to the Green Bay Packers at 30, which is a really interesting rumor as well. And that kind of threshold, does that team start to look to the future with a guy that maybe is sitting high on their board at 30? Or do you make one last run at, you know, supplying weapons around Aaron Rodgers, you know, the way Tampa has kind of gone all in with their approach as well at Tom Brady? You know, I think the moving up aspect is going to be really interesting.
And that was going to be my next one for the rumors I'm buying stock in. Albert Breer from SI.com noted 3 teams that are interested in moving up, and that's the Tampa Bay Bucks, the Denver Broncos, and the Atlanta Falcons. I'm buying all 3. I think that the Bucks, going all in with Tom Brady, hey, if we want to move up and get one of these big tackles to make sure that he's protected, or, you know, you want to try and get another one of these receivers, I guess, to add to that receiving core, you know, I think that will be very, very interesting. Wouldn't be shocked at all by that. Denver, if they decide, hey, you know what, we're a receiver away, we want to make sure we get Jerry Jeudy to pair with Cortland Sutton to make one of the best receiver combinations in the NFL, would not shock me. And the Falcons are always a threat to move up or down. So totally buying that report from Albert Breer. C-Mac, anything extra you want to throw in for yours?
So for my second one here, I'm going to go with Brent Sobleski from the Bleacher Report saying that no receivers will be in the top 10 picks this year. And you might be surprised because we keep talking about the big three of Judy, Lamb, and Ruggs. But Sobleski argues, is there one who's really, really worthy of that top 10 selection? Is there a Julio Jones in this draft class? And you look at probably at least three of the quarterbacks are going to go top 10. These four offensive tackles could all go potentially early. Then you throw in your Derek Brown, your Isaiah Simmons, Jeff Okudah. There's a shot that these wide receivers, because of the depth of the class, could get pushed back a little bit. So I will buy stock in that no receivers will be selected in the top 10.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Ben, what is your last one here?
So it's really kind of just a collective thought and kind of rumors and, buzz we're hearing about. So like Yahoo's Eric Eldholm, I just mentioned about, FIU quarterback James Morgan meeting with all these teams after the combine, meeting with 14 teams. And he just also noted he sat down with 26 teams at the East-West Shrine game. And as we're getting here, and obviously the team visits are dried up and no pro days and things like that, I just wonder how much more value are we putting into these teams that have had time to either coach these players in the All-Star games or meet with the players, whether the Shrine Week, NFLPA, the obviously Senior Bowl, Combine Week that, some teams didn't even send scouts to this year. So now we're starting to dig into who has done their homework up to this point. And I think it's going to be really interesting when you're getting into day 3 decisions. Who do we know and who don't we know? And getting into guys like James Morgans of the world that have now literally met with nearly every team in the NFL, that has interesting value, I think, when we're getting into the late rounds of this very awkward draft in 2020.
I feel like we're going to see less guys get drafted that were not at the All-Star games or the Combine this year than normal. Usually we see somewhere around 30 guys that were not invited to the Combine. You get drafted every year. My gut is that it's closer to like 10, 12, 15 guys that don't, that were not invited to the Combine that are going to get drafted. I just.
And I'm excited for guys, Fran. I'm excited for like a Kevin Davidson at a Princeton or a Mason Fine at a North Texas. Maybe somebody that met extra, minutes or an hour with somebody at that East-West Shrine game where, there was a little bit more time to meet. And, maybe somebody fell in love with one of these kids. And maybe somebody sees Mason Fine as a Nick Marshall and can maybe play defensive back or a Wildcat quarterback. And I just think we're going to get a couple of those stories this year into day 3, into priority free agency, that it's a lot about familiarity and who do we know versus who don't we know in this draft.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, guys, let's wrap this show up. It's time now for Draft Mailbag.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
So as always, the best way to support this show, look, the draft is right around the corner. So if you've got mock drafts, if you've got questions, now is the time. We've got a couple more episodes that we're going to knock out before the draft gets here. All right. Right now, we're going to go with Pete Mathan. That's a 5-star review saying, check out this mock draft. We'll buzz through real quick, guys. And at the end, I'll ask your thoughts. Justin Jefferson in round 1. He said, great all-around receiver for Carson Wentz to grow with. Julian Aquara, the defensive end from Notre Dame, saying a speedy DN that can drop in coverage and be an overall good fit. Tyler Biadasz, the Wisconsin center, said if he lasts to 103, he's a great pickup. He could play guard and maybe even back up a tackle as well if we really need him to. Round 4, Antonio Gibson can play in the slot at running back and maybe a good player for the goal line. He can also help out on special teams. I agree there. J.R. Reed in the 4th round, well-tackling safety who can play decent coverage and be a good ball hawk. And then Reggie Robinson. We've talked about him a little bit on this podcast already, the corner from Tulsa. Think he'll be the steal of the draft. This dude can play corner really well. He's not really the Jim Schwartz type of corner, but he is a playmaker. 5th round, John Hightower, the speedster out of Boise State, said he's got great outside speed and great on the go routes, but inconsistent hands. But if he lasts this long, it's worth drafting and developing him because you can't teach speed. And then lastly, Tanner Muse, the safety linebacker from Clemson, expecting teams to use him at linebacker. He would be a great addition. So guys, I'll go to you first. Just big takeaway here from Pete's mock draft.
Look, I love the fact that you get 3 playmakers for the offense with Justin Jefferson, who's been widely mocked to the Eagles at 21. Antonio Gibson, versatile with the ability to play running back and wide receiver, talked a lot about on this podcast. And he mentioned the speed element with Hightower. But I'm going to look at the 2nd round pick, which is a spot where the Eagles need to infuse some youth. And going into this season, right now, Vinny Curry is a free agent. He played about 400 quality snaps for this team last season. they're going to need somebody to pick up the pieces there. Now, they have some guys in-house who potentially could do that. Jannard Avery and Sharif Miller, last year's 4th-round pick. But Brandon Graham, obviously 2010 first-round pick. He's getting up there. I would not be surprised to see the Eagles address edge rusher. And I know it's not a very deep class, so it would be intriguing to see if the Eagles were to pull the trigger with an early round selection.
So next one here from Ed Media, left a 5-star review saying, great podcast. I listen to all year round. These guys put so much work in to give you some great content. Appreciate that, Ed. Coming into this year's draft, I feel like I know a ton of players, not just the guys taken in the first round. Number one, the first round, he said, no one was worth taking at 21, so I traded out for a first and a fourth for 2 second-rounders from the Colts. So he ended up with 3 second-round picks. A.J. Terrell, the Clemson corner, Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver from Arizona State, and Kyle Duggar, the safety from Lenore-Ryan. So I love when teams have a bunch of second-round picks. I always walk away from that thinking, like, man, they got a few good players, and that would be a very, very fun haul in the second round if you come out with those 3. Third round, Chase Claypool, the wide receiver from Notre Dame. Then you've got Devin Duvernay from the receiver from Texas. Reggie Robinson, again, very, very popular. Ben, I think you've
the third straight mock draft. You can't see C-Mac, but I'm Tootsie shuffling over here, or whatever your dance was.
If once Reggie Robinson, that signing bonus, he's got to cut you a check here, Ben, at some point. Then Davion Taylor, the linebacker from Colorado, and Alex Taylor, the athletic tackle from South Carolina State. Ben, your thoughts overall on this mock?
Well, just looking at the past 2 mock drafts, I just love the offensive haul. Here going Ayuk, Chase Claypool, Devin Duvernay, kind of a speedy returner. Chase Claypool, obviously more of a big, oversized receiver, but an explosive player that can play above the rim. Devin Duvernay, just behind Justin Jefferson in nearly every slot category with track speed, also has spent some time in the backfield. But, that previous mock draft, again, Gibson, John Hightower, Justin Jefferson, that's 4.4, 4.3, 4.4 speed. And I think this Philadelphia Eagles offense can use a jolt of speed and a little bit of a youth movement to surround Carson Wentz with and really kind of threaten opposing defenses and get ready to put up 30, 35 points a game and light up this scoreboard in 2020 because Carson Wentz can use some weapons around him and this offense is ready to go.
It's a great point. We got a couple more here. Linebacker questions, left a 5-star review saying, thanks for keeping the content coming in the time of quarantine. It helps me and I'm sure others in taking our minds off of what is going on right now. I know it would be good to add linebacker depth in this draft. There are some guys that I have seen going middle to late day 2 and early day 3 that really seem to fit what the Eagles are looking for with an athletic linebacker. Could they push for a starting role early? What do you guys think of players like Akeem Davis-Gaither, who's from Appalachian State, Jordan Brooks from Texas Tech, Malik Harrison from Ohio State, Logan Wilson from Wyoming, and then Willie Gay Jr. from Mississippi State. Also, could you see us taking a shot on a Tanner Muse out of Clemson and turning him into a linebacker similar to what Thomas Davis was or what we did a couple of years ago with Nate Gary? So obviously a lot of players there. I'd like to, maybe each of you guys, if you want to maybe pick one, C-Mac or Ben, I'll go to you first. So who's the guy from that group that you would pick and kind of break down for us?
One, no, we're taking them all, Fran. All right. The interesting thing collectively about those 6 linebackers, man, this is all different shapes and sizes. Like the undersized Akeem Davis-Gaither, Jordan Brooks looks like a fullback, playing linebacker. Malik Harrison looks like a tight end playing linebacker at 6'4", 250. Logan Wilson's kind of a safety in that role. Willie Gay, explosive player. All different shapes and sizes here. So I think the Eagles and their fans really kind of need to put together a pros and cons and what do you want out of that off-ball linebacker position? What do we ask them to do? What don't we ask them to do? Because you can't get everything in these players. So I think finding out what their skill sets are and what this defense needs. Is it a base thing? Do we feel comfortable with TJ Edwards as a base linebacker, or is this really a sub-package position? And it's the future of the nickel and dime and that linebacker position in sub-packages. So a lot of different shapes and sizes and talent at the linebacker position in this draft.
C-Mac, anyone there stand out?
I was going to say the Malik Harrison. He's someone who I thought had a great workout at the combine. I like the comparison or the analogy that Ben put out tight end out there, because even though he's a bigger linebacker, he's a very fluid mover. We got to see him at the Senior Bowl as well. So of those guys, I think Malik Harrison is someone who's kind of lost in the shuffle because everybody's been, touting Willie Gay and the athleticism that he brings. Same with Davis Gaither and Jordan Brooks and Wilson as well. But I think Malik Harrison's a little bit lost in the shuffle here. A little bit more of an old school throwback, but still I think has the necessary athleticism to play all three downs in the NFL.
And one guy I'll mention, it was Logan Wilson, from Wyoming. You're talking about a big, long kid. I mean, he's 6'2", he's 240, 32.5-inch long arms, high school receiver and defensive back. And I think that shows up on film. He's got excellent ball skills. I've seen him run down the field, down the seam with receivers down the slot, and play the ball in the air. Was really productive. 53 starts in his career. He's been a long-time starter out there for the Cowboys. And this is a guy that has just got a nose for the football. He's consistently productive both against the run and the pass. Does a lot of different things for that defense. So I look at Logan Wilson as a really, really intriguing player moving on to the next level. Great question there. Last one from Valhalla24, left a 5-star review. Process question here. If you could shed some light on how the scouting process works, does the general manager tell the college scouts positions of need for them to scout? Or do scouts just scout players and tell the GM players that fit? And how much does the head coach play in the process? Fran is slowly turning me into an Eagles fan. Well, so obviously not an Eagles fan there, but appreciate the comment, appreciate the rating and the question there. Valhalla, I'll jump on this one, guys. It's much more the second scenario that you laid out. The area scouts, they're not taking position. This is, I want to say this is for all 32 teams, but I would say most teams in the NFL are operating where the college scouts go out and they're going to evaluate everybody in their area that's, that they deem to be an NFL-worthy prospect. So they're going to watch all of those players. They're going to evaluate them. They're going to write up reports, strengths, weaknesses, how they fit for their team. Whatever the value system that team uses, their grading scale, they're going to go through all of the paces with that player. And then it's up to the general manager and the directors of player personnel, all of the executives at the top to figure out, okay, is this a guy that we're going to fit whether we're a best player available or whether we're picking for need or whatever it is, they're going to figure that out. But you're relying on your scouts to go out and just evaluate everybody in that area. And it's their job to be able to come back and say, here are the 300 players that I've evaluated this fall. You do with this information what you must. And then as far as how the coaching staff's used, every team is a little bit different. Sometimes in some organizations, the coaching staff has big voice, and others it's a little bit of a smaller voice. I think the best general managers take as much information as possible and use it to their advantage. They're going to talk to everybody in the building, get as many eyeballs on players as possible, whether that's on film or in person, and just getting to meet them and get a sense of them and their personality and how they would fit in the building. All the best teams, to me, use as many resources. Look, it's an inexact science, as we said, so the more information you can get, the better. And that's just the way that I look at it. I don't know if you guys have anything to tack on to the end of that.
The only thing I want to say is the one thing with the quarantine and not being able to have the pro days this year that's going to be intriguing is the college scouts are usually use the pro days to start getting ahead on next year's class, to start finding out about the guys for the 2021
It's a great point.
draft class. So that is going to be something that is going to be very interesting to see how will they make up the time for that. But pretty much the scouts are already going to transition into 2021 mode at this point, because by and large the hay is in the barn for 2020, except for maybe finalizing the draft boards.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say, Fran, is we all know each scouting department has like a manual and kind of a philosophical mission statement for the organization. But heading into the draft, it's the teams that know who they are and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to win that I think are going to be the most successful, because you have to know what meal are we trying to cook, and then we can get the right ingredients for it, and then everybody is happy along down the line in the kitchen. It's the guys that try to be a little too versatile, a little too multiple, that they don't have a true identity. Then on draft day, it's kind of a Rolodex of a selection. So I think the teams that are really focused with their own identity, and sometimes you really do have to self-scout and figure out where did we have to improve, what works, what doesn't work. And I think the teams that really know themselves and are honest with themselves about who they are and what they need are the ones that are collectively top to bottom, coaches, scouts, GMs, players, position coaches, whatever, all on the same page and all working towards the same goal.
It's a great point. I think when you have that kind of synergy between your personnel staff and your coaching staff, that's where you're cooking.
And I think that some teams, Fran, the ones that really cross-train behind the scenes, like, the Chiefs and the Eagles and the Patriots and the Packers, that like to have, that rotation of bodies, that you may be a position coach one year, a scout the next year, and vice versa. Just making sure you have that cohesion with every layer of the organization, and that your scouts aren't segmented from your coaches, and all of a sudden you try to bring everybody together for 2 months out of the year, and it's kind of a crapshoot of ideas and a think tank. I think the ones that really understand and diversify their own personnel are the healthiest organizations.
100%. Well, guys, it's going to be a crazy week for us next week here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Hope everybody out there enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.